my fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plan in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid. and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, They get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he had gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
But these were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into Redacted on this Wednesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we seek the truth wherever it may come from. We have no agenda here. We're not paid for by billionaire corporations. We're supported by you. So thank you guys so much for being a part of our great community here. Independent journalists, of course, are under attack all over the place. And these free speech platforms like Rumble are under attack. So thank you guys so much for taking time out of your afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern time, to join us here on this show. We've got a very busy show for you because big questions tonight, whether or not Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, will resign. Just a few moments ago, offering a really half-hearted apology, throwing his House Speaker under the bus, but widening calls for him to resign in the wake of the Nazi flap and a potential new major scandal involving his airplane. We'll get into all of that in just moments.
Plus, was Dr. Fauci sneakily visiting the CIA to give them his foregone conclusions about the origins of COVID? That is what Congress says based on their investigation. We're going to show you that.
Also, what really happened on 9/11? Well, RFK Jr. has some thoughts on it, and apparently the corporate media is not a fan of the fact that you would question the 9/11 attacks, the official narrative from the United States government. We're going to cover all of that and more as Redacted starts right now. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to see everyone. I had a viewer come up to me today and said, "Redacted." And he just pointed at me and he said, "Keep doing what you're doing." And that's hilarious.
He said that in English?
Yeah.
No, he didn't, but go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I played pool last night with a viewer when he was kind of asking me what I did, and he was like, "Oh, which YouTube channel?" I told him. He was like, "Oh, that's cool." And so we were talking, and then I beat him. He was
distracted.
Shot, I hope he still comes back
distracted.
to the show.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't hold it against us. I didn't beat you. You could beat me quite handily at pool. Thank you for joining the show where we are non-pacifist peace extremists. This is my tagline that Clayton is not signing off on, but I love
really
it.
Flows off the tongue.
Because we are extreme about calling for peace from all global governments. We hold everybody to task. We talk about the things that the mainstream media largely ignores or spins. Oh my God, I saw some spin today that blew my mind.
There's a lot of spin in tonight's show.
Just so many lies. Lies all over the mainstream media. We're going to call them out and you tell us what you think. Remember, you can subscribe to our newsletter because that is the place where we link you to these places so you can see for yourself whether these things are true or false. Are they right or wrong? We cover mainly the same stories that we do in this show Monday through Thursday. It's a free subscription. You just put in your email address and then you will get the daily newsletter. Furthermore, you get links to the things that we talk about, and you get more stories too. Plus, it's maybe a little bit lighthearted. Some of it's fun. We try and present it to you with levity, even though that the stories that we are covering are not light and levity, but we do our best. So please do subscribe to the newsletter. It's redacted.inc. Once again, it's totally free. Daily newsletter, redacted.inc.
Well, the calls are getting louder for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada to step down, resign in the wake of a few scandals that are unfolding. Of course, a Nazi brought before Parliament, applauded, giving standing ovations. Then the fall guy, the Speaker of the House of Commons, resigning yesterday, taking full responsibility for it. But we've been able to, I think, see through all of that charade. And then word that the Prime Minister's aircraft, cocaine found on board, reports of cocaine found on board, the Prime Minister's office denying it. But why was the plane grounded for 2 days in India? The Toronto Sun reporting this, among other sources on this. And moments ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came out with what I think he would call an apology, but really seems like a half-hearted apology, throwing his Speaker of the House of Commons completely under the bus.
Canadians, in front of Jewish people here and around the world, and Ukrainians, to offer Parliament's unreserved apologies for what happened on Friday. The Speaker was solely responsible for the invitation and recognition of this man and has wholly accepted that responsibility and stepped down.
So all of these calls for Justin Trudeau to step aside in the wake of these most recent scandals, will that happen? Let's ask David Clayton from Clayton's Right and a writer at the Post Millennial. Joins us from Canada, from Ottawa. David, good to see you.
Always good to be back, Clayton. Thank you.
So last night, also, we should mention there was an emergency cabinet meeting, I guess maybe around midnight last night. We don't know the full details of this. I know you're just getting word on this. I don't know if do you think it may have anything to do with either the cocaine story or the Nazi story in the House of in Parliament, or maybe totally unrelated to this?
I think it has everything to do with the cocaine story and the Nazi story. The story of this former Waffen-SS member coming to Parliament has just continues to explode around the world. And it's an embarrassment that Trudeau has deliberately sidestepped the last 2 days in question period, where the Prime Minister is supposed to be there front and center representing the government, answering the questions of the opposition. He has skipped Monday and Tuesday, and he has put his House leader there up front, who is a pregnant woman, by the way, typical of Trudeau, to hide behind somebody else. So he puts a pregnant woman up there to take all of the abuse from the opposition, asking these questions about, where is Justin Trudeau? Why is he not responding to this? And she's reading her script, of course, about how, we're all very embarrassed about this, and it's really quite a horrible thing. And she is doing a horrible job, of course. But Justin Trudeau is finding any excuse not to come to the House of Commons. And yesterday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said, well, at least I show up for work. You can call me irresponsible if you want for bringing up these issues about how the Prime Minister obviously knew about this former Nazi coming to the House of Commons, coming to Parliament. But Justin Trudeau doesn't even show up for work. And I do believe that he is under intense pressure from his caucus and from his cabinet to resign, even though, unfortunately, Pierre Poilievre has not called for the Prime Minister to resign. Maybe he will today, but he has not in the House of Commons for the past 2 days. He has simply said the Prime Minister needs to apologize. And unfortunately, Poilievre has emphasized that apology far too much to Zelensky and Ukraine than he has to Canadians and Canadian vets. I've been very, very disappointed in how he has pushed this message, and I think entirely the wrong way. But yes, Justin Trudeau does need to apologize. He does need to come clean on this. And, well, I've been saying he should resign for a long time, not just for these issues, but because the country is in tatters.
Well, he did come out in front of the camera, even though he didn't show up on the floor of Parliament. He did release a video where he blamed what happened in Parliament by bringing a Nazi out there and getting a standing ovation. He blamed that on Russian propaganda. Let's play this soundbite and get you to respond.
Obviously, it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians. I think particularly of Jewish MPs and all members of the Jewish community across the country who are commemorating Yom Kippur today. I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and continue our steadfast and unequivocal support for Ukraine, as we did last week with announcing further measures to stand with Ukraine in Russia's illegal war against it.
So, David, it was Russian propaganda. It was the fault of Putin that they brought a Nazi on the floor of Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, this is just so laughable. And on two fronts, really, because clearly there was a Speaker of the House, Anthony Rota, a member of Parliament from the North Bay area of Ontario, who obviously didn't grow up watching Hogan's Heroes. He didn't even seem to know that the Allies were fighting on the same side as Russia during the Second World War. We weren't fighting Russia. In fact, we've actually never been fighting Russia in the last 70 years. So I don't know where this came from, why the Speaker was so ignorant about Canadian history. But that's not Russian disinformation. That's unfortunately a failure of our education system and a failure of something else with Mr. Rota. I don't understand why he didn't know that. But what's really disturbing is that the House leader on the first day that Pierre Poilievre brought up this whole issue about why did this happen? Why is the Prime Minister not taking responsibility? She actually suggested that the entire event, everything, including what Rhoda said about this Waffen-SS member being a Canadian hero, that all of this, including the documentation that every member of Parliament rose from their seat and applauded this man, giving him a standing ovation, that all of this be erased from the historical parliamentary record. This is mind-boggling, because if anybody who has read 1984 knows, the lead character in that book, that's his job. He goes back and he excises, redacts, as you're censors historical moments to make them jive with the current policy of the government, or anything that would be embarrassing that happened last week that would be embarrassing for the government today. And that's what she asked to do. And she wanted unanimous consent from the House of Commons, which only happens when there is an issue of huge principle that every MP can agree on. She asked for that and didn't get it. Thank God the Conservatives said, no, we're not going to do this because this sounds like the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany. In fact, what they quoted George Santayana, who said, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. Yeah, clearly. And this is mind-boggling and frightening that we have a Trudeau government that wants to excise the past because it embarrasses them today.
So this Nazi, 98 years old, now the Polish government making moves to want to extradite him to Poland. I mean, presumably to stand, trial for war crimes. And the worst of the worst, the Waffen-SS. So will the Canadian government go along with this extradition? He's been outed now. I mean, they hunt people down like this. They hunt people down like this for years. People make it their mission to find these types of Nazis, and the Trudeau government basically outed him for it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Clayton, because, of course, you brought up this very issue the last time we spoke. You said, do you think there will be potential prosecution of this man? I said, well, I don't know. Literally 24 hours later comes a letter from the government of Poland saying, we want this man, because they believe he participated in war crimes in Poland, and specifically in the massacre of a village of Polish Jews. Now, will the Canadian government extradite him? This is always a sticky process, whether it's Canada or the U.S. or any democratic country in Europe where a war criminal is believed to be living, and to extradite him to the country where he is potentially going to be tried. It's always a difficult process. It takes sometimes years. Will he die in the process? But I really want to know and wonder, will the Canadian government even want to cooperate because of the potential embarrassment, not only in terms of why this guy was living in a safe haven of Canada all of these years, but why did all these Waffen-SS, ex-Waffen-SS soldiers enter Canada in the 1950s to begin with? Why were they given, apparently, new lives in Canada, allowed to live unmolested by the law? Nobody asked any serious questions. And can you tell me why Anthony Rota, the former speaker, obviously knew this man for years? He didn't just meet him last week. He must have known him for years. And there must be others in that community who are perhaps involved and were involved in the same unit during the war, or others like it. Is this going to be an explosive story? I think there's a back channel story here that hasn't even been examined. I'd like to do it myself, actually. But I am curious how willing the Canadian government is going to be to actually extradite this man. I would say, like you, that yes, he should be.
He should be, yeah.
He should be, yes.
Yeah, absolutely, I believe he should be. And this would be a way for Canada to save face and say we made a huge mistake. He should stand trial for war crimes. We're going to extradite him back to Poland. They're asking for it. We understand that he was involved in this massacre of this village of Poles during World War II. And we were pleading ignorance before, but now we've seen the light. Let's send him off to Poland. And of course, Poland is having to walk a real delicate balance here, because on the one hand, they're totally supporting Ukraine and very much anti-Russia at this stage, while at the same time asking for a Nazi who is standing there with Zelensky. So it's a very delicate, very bizarre. I'm sure there's a back channel, some sort of back channel diplomacy happening that we are unaware of, and it'd be really interesting to be a fly on that wall. I hope you get some good information on that from your sources, both in Parliament and otherwise. David Clayton, great to see you. Thanks as always. Unbelievable that Canada continues to surprise us, and we'll see what happens with the Prime Minister. Will he resign? That's the question of the day. David, great to see you.
Thank you again, Clayton.
Always great. Thank you so much, David. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for subscribing to the channel and being a part of our community here, supporting independent journalists like David. David does an amazing job in Canada, so thanks to him for his great reporting. Sherry, who's watching us, Sherry Stone right now from Canby, Indiana. Thank you for saying hi. Nice to see you in the chat room today. Says, Natalie, you look beautiful as usual. Thank you, Sherry.
A fellow Hoosier.
Yeah, Hoosier's in the house. David's a Hoosier. Philip's a Hoosier.
Yep.
Is Grim? No, Grim is Grim. Yeah, Grim's a Hoosier
Grim
too.
lives in Evansville, Indiana.
3 of our production team from
Indiana.
From Indiana. Hoosiers
What do you
in the
know
house.
about that?
We got more news to get to here on your Wednesday, but let us know what you guys think of this in the chat below. Will Justin Trudeau resign? Will he be forced to resign there in Canada? It seems like all manner of scandals can play out in the United States and no one resigns. Like they're too proud, I guess. Biden will never resign. All the money, the illegal money that's been flowing.
We're too used to it.
We're too used to it. But in Canada, are you used to it in this way where this kind of a scandal could actually bring down a prime minister? It'd be interesting. Let us know in the chat if you think that Prime Minister Trudeau is going to call it quits. What a half-hearted BS, though, apology. Like he comes out and just says, yeah, Speaker, fully responsible for it.
That guy. We don't vet people. And we don't go over history at all.
Oh, it's such garbage.
Yeah. Not only that, they threw the guy under the bus that already resigned. He was already under the bus. Like he just crawled under there to shake his body around a little.
Let's drive it back over it a couple of times. The thump. There, we drove it over him again. Anyway, we got more news to get to on your Wednesday. We're going to talk about Dr. Fauci and the CIA. How cozy did they in fact get? This may surprise you. We're also going to talk about the American draft coming back. Yes, the Biden administration perhaps showing signs of reinstituting the draft.
I mean, they literally say, we're going to show you some shocking documents from Pentagon academics that say, well, we plan to lose about 3,600 people a day, so we need more bodies to fill that in. So you want to sign up for that? For a war where we could be experiencing 3,600 casualties a day? Sign me up. So glad I've got this passport.
So the draft coming back. Well, we'll get to that story in moments. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Factor, because with the fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days, such as school days, school nights, people getting home from practice late, from work late, whatever it is. That's why Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. I saw a mom meme recently that said, how come nobody told me that I would be responsible for everyone's meals from here on out? Because, it's the parents that have to think about, plan, shop for every meal, and every meal you get off where you don't have to use your creative brain power to come up with something is, in my book, a win and a blessing. So not only do you not have to come up with the meal, you don't have to shop for it, and you don't have to look for the recipe. It's all laid out for you. So you can adjust your stride this autumn without missing a step and choose from 34 or more weekly flavor-packed, fresh, never frozen meals ready in 2 minutes. You can level up with Gourmet Plus options prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccolini, leeks, truffle butter, asparagus, getting fancy here. With Factor, you can rest assured that you're making a sustainable choice because they offset 100% of their delivery emissions, they say, sourced 100% renewable electricity for their production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in their meals. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. So head to factormeals.com/redacted50. You can see it there at the bottom of your screen. Use the code redacted50 and get 50% off. So that's, again, 50% off using the code redacted50 at factormeals.com/redacted50 for your 50% off.
And thanks to all of you. When you subscribe, hey, the Herald donated $1.99. Thank you guys so much. When you subscribe to the channel here, your name will pop up on the big board. Michael White. Welcome to the rebellion, Michael. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. And I don't know, do we have it tied into Rumble yet? I guess it does tie in. Anyway, so subscribe on Rumble, subscribe on YouTube. Your name will pop up here on the big screen. We really appreciate it.
There you are, David. I see your camera now. We're up and going. Does this board tie into Rumble, we're asking? Yeah,
no, it does not.
Not yet? Okay.
They don't have that feature.
All right. Well, we're working on that. So our Rumble viewers, today Rumble released a statement just talking about how they're getting hammered for standing for free speech. We're going to talk more about that a little bit tomorrow. But free speech, you guys, is not free. So support the creators and platforms that still are able to speak freely.
Yeah, it's not... I mean, it's really, really struggling right now. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm really scared. I will be totally honest with you. I had a great conversation with a fellow independent journalist this afternoon, a British independent journalist, and it's really scary what's happening to independent media right now. And I don't know. I quite honestly don't know how much longer we'll be around. I don't know how much longer this show will be around, or the big platforms the free speech platforms that we support. I don't know. But so we got to all stand together, guys, and, really got to support it. You can share this show out with other people. It's free. You don't charge anything for the show. So just share it out with people. And I don't know what else to do, to be honest with you. I mean,
well, we show up. That's what
we show up. We keep going. We don't give up. We never, ever, ever give up. And all you do is share the show. That's all we can do. It's a free show. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Just, flip off your cable subscriptions. Maybe that's one way to do it,
The guy I was talking about that I played pool with last night, he was saying that around the time of all the lockdowns, he had a YouTube channel, 100,000 viewers, stuff like that, and he was covering the Portland riots from sort of from his words, from a right wing point of view, and YouTube shut him down, and he lost his livelihood, and he had to kind of move on. He lost all of his social from it, and they just shut him up.
Yeah. And those are the people you don't hear about, right? The Russell Brand everyone's talking about, and who knows what's about to happen to him. Some, really troubling what could about to happen there. And so the small guys, 100,000 subscribers that you don't hear about, he just disappears one day. And that's it. And YouTube, there's no PR blowback. There's no, Seattle newspapers don't cover it. Portland newspapers don't cover it. He's just gone.
Yeah.
And they win,
And now we're seeing just today, Linda Yaccarino, the CEO of Twitter, had spoken to the Financial Times, and she said, well, we really do value free speech. It's an American ethos. We're committed to it. But, we don't think free speech means free exposure. So she's basically admitting that you can yell into an echo chamber, but they may not surface your tweets or your content if they feel like it is, what does she call it? Legal but deplorable or something like that. She has a word for it. Legal but anyway. And so the free speech may be still a value but not free reach. So we have a hard time getting to you. Thank you if you're here right now, if you hit that like button, if you share this, it helps a lot, because then it helps to lift us up in the algorithm, which is not our friend.
Yeah. Anyway, It's a free show. So thank you guys all I wanted to say is thank you for being here and showing up and supporting us, because again, it's really a troubling time right now for independent journalists and free media platforms, not free media platforms, independent journalists. So thank you. All right, let's move on.
Okay. Was Dr. Fauci working directly with the CIA to cover up COVID's origins? That is what Congress said did happen. And in fact, they are alleging that Fauci was sneakily entering the CIA without putting his name on visitor logs for a reason, as in covert entry into the CIA. They claim they can prove it. Let's look at what they said. So high-level questions first. What does Dr. Fauci have to do with the CIA? Why did the CIA need to either have or change a conclusion about the origins of COVID? Here's the news. So this comes from the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic. They say that Dr. Anthony Fauci, while he was head of the NIH, went to the CIA to assist in the COVID origins cover-up. They say this was a covert visit. See what's written here? The information suggests that Dr. Fauci was escorted into the CIA headquarters without a record of entry and participated in the analysis to influence the agency's reviews. So what they mean here by the agency review is referring to this report they gave us dated September 12th, saying that they had a whistleblower who they thought was highly credible, a senior level CIA officer, saying that 7 members assigned to a CIA task team to analyze the origins of COVID, 6 of them concluded that the virus likely originated from a lab in China, but then the CIA offered them financial incentives and they all changed their mind after the money to a zoonotic origin, saying, oh yes, must have come from animals. I thought before the lab, I misspoke and I got a wad of cash in my pocket that tells me that I misspoke, is what they said. Now, the letter that Congress published said that the researchers were offered money, but a follow-up letter from Chairman Brad Wenstrup says that they were, and Mike Turner says they were given money. So I believe we are led to believe here money was exchanged. They took the money. It was spent. It was your taxpayer money that paid scientists to change their mind. So when the government tells you to follow the science, what they mean is follow what we paid to be science. Got it?
Right.
Okay. Now it seems like Fauci was in on that too. The committee is asking for any visits that Dr. Fauci made to the CIA between 2020 and 2022 when he retired. They're asking for all communications internally about Dr. Fauci and the CIA, and they're asking for the testimony of Special Agent Brett Rowland, who's a criminal investigator for the Department of Health and Human Services. I did not know that the HHS had their own criminal investigators who could file charges, but they do, and Congress wants to talk to him because presumably he might have caught this, sniffed it out, right? If Fauci was being snuck into the CIA, and this is collaboration between HHS and the CIA, would he know this? Would it have been flagged on his radar? They want to know that. Now, Fauci's participation in influencing this very conclusion. So what he wanted us to believe all along was that COVID didn't come from a lab, right? We have gone over how he helped influence the conclusion of an academic paper to specifically say that COVID did not come from a lab. He was in on pitching those researchers, pitching the journal. He got to see review copies before they was published of that paper. He got to provide feedback. The paper's researchers told the publication that Fauci had commissioned this study, and him and Dr. Farrar, who now works for the World Health Organization, Dr. Jeremy Farrar, both changed the outcome of that paper to say it is very unlikely that COVID came from a lab. They don't want us to think that. They want us to think it's totally zoonotic. Why? Well, that's a really good question, and we can have our theories. But we know that he did this at least with the academic paper. Did he then do it also with the CIA? Is the question. We also know that he ignored Pentagon researchers who said that COVID very likely could have come from a lab. That was in the summer of 2020. And we know that separately, the FBI and the Department of Energy last year said that COVID probably did come from a lab. They think it's likely, both of those organizations. And the CIA has held out at agreeing with them. So now it seems maybe they paid researchers in order to reach that conclusion. That seems highly probable. And it also seems highly likely that Fauci was in on that too, with secret. I mean, why would they say this if they couldn't prove this, right?
Right. So, as we've reported here on the show, created probably at Fort Detrick, then transported and carried to the Wuhan laboratory in China, where it was released. Whether it was a leak or an actual release on purpose, That's the great question, I suppose.
Right. And we have also reported on how a respiratory virus leaked from Fort Detrick in the summer of 2019.
Right.
So
workers,
we know that.
Yeah, workers that we featured here on the show who were there and working there at the time. Truck drivers who were transporting things became very, very ill after having gone into Fort Detrick.
Right. Doctors who said, it's so weird, we have a respiratory virus in July in a nursing home in 2019. Right. We've shown you that footage.
Right near Fort, it's crazy. It's right near this fort where they're doing all this biological research.
So strange.
It's very strange how that
yes,
happens.
we know that. And we know that lab was shut down early on in the pandemic. And researchers were not able, no one in the international community was able to look into this. Now, China has said many times, we let you into Wuhan, we want to get into Fort Detrick. This is a tit for tat.
Yeah.
That's not really the right. I guess it is, yeah.
Tit for tat?
Doesn't sound like something I should say. I don't think I'm going to say that again.
Is it a tit for a tat? Let us know in the chat.
What is a tat?
Sorry, I know.
Okay.
Well, a tit's a bird, and a tat could be a tattoo.
Is it cui bono?
So,
cui bono?
Cui bono applies here, absolutely.
Cui bono? Is it a tit for a tat or a cui bono?
I don't know.
Or who came up with this stuff?
I don't know. I didn't mean to derail with that funny little quip, but
well, when we're talking about a little troll, I'm sorry, I can't help but picture like the movie Trolls 2, which is arguably one of the worst movies ever made, but a hilarious movie if you've never seen Trolls 2.
Eve wants us to take her to Trolls 3. Can you do that?
Well, no, Trolls, that's the animated film. I'm talking about the live action Trolls movie. But I can't help when I think of Fauci, think of the Trolls movie, like Trolls 2. And like I can picture this little troll like sneaking into the CIA headquarters. Like what kind of an outfit do they give the guy? Do they give him like a disguise?
Oh, like a Kermit the Frog disguise?
Right. He's got like a raincoat on, like a Flasher's raincoat and a little hat. And he's like, Fauci's in the building and he's sneaking into the CIA.
My name is Smanthony Mauchi.
Yeah. Where does he park?
Write that down.
Like if you're not officially there that day, do you just let you park in the clandestine lot so no one knows where you're coming from? Little Fauci in his little trench coat. And yeah. Anyway, I just couldn't help but laughing about that's what I picture him.
Okay. Well, let us know how probable you think it is that Dr. Fauci was doing some underhanded things with the CIA. Why is the CIA participating in underhanded things around COVID? These are valid questions.
Yeah.
Valid.
All right. We've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. And thank you guys so much for subscribing. Thank you to all of the likes here. About 6,000 likes now on YouTube. Thank you guys. Let's see if we can get it up to, we're at 18,000 of you watching right now. So if 18,000 of you will smash that like button on YouTube, it'll really help push us further out into the suppressive algorithm that loves to block us. And on Rumble, thank you guys so much. We're about 13,000 of you watching on Rumble now. So thanks to the... I'm not good at math, but that's like 30-some thousand. So that's like like before Taylor Swift was huge, she had a small arena.
Okay. Incidentally, I've looked for what I had said earlier. The CEO of Twitter, Linda Yaccarino, said that Twitter is suppressing speech that's lawful but awful. So things that you are allowed to say will be downranked if they find it deplorable. But if it is not wrongthink, it will be surfaced. So, which is so interesting. So today I lost my mind over this. I really lost my mind over this BBC headline about this European Union new law about online speech and censorship. The BBC said that this new think tank has a report that shows that Russian disinformation is really prolific on Twitter. Well, I read the report. It said nothing about Russia. It was just this new startup, what do they call it? Disinformation monitoring startup that had nothing to do with searching where disinformation comes with. They just made a list of what they thought was disinformation keywords and searched it on social networks. Had nothing to do with Russia. But the BBC headline said Russian disinformation prolific on Twitter. That's a lie. They didn't even read it. And so that is the kind of content that will be surfaced to you because it's anti-Russian. And they want you to see that and just feeds into your biases and like, great, Russia's manipulating Twitter. Russia's not even, Twitter's closed in Russia, isn't it? You need a VPN, I believe, to even get into it.
I don't know.
First of all. Second of all, it's lazy. That's not what the report says. So we see what's being surfaced and what's being suppressed because it's legal. What did I say again? This is stupid. Lawful but awful. I can't even get the
We're
down,
creating just a generation of sheep, people who are just, ignorance. I mean, people are just now being surrounded by a lack of information, a lack of transparency. They're being nonstop censorship, so they're not being able to see accurate information, and we're creating a generation of just sheep, of clowns, and it's really disturbing. Free-thinking people having genuine arguments about things and having an intelligent discussion is just lost now. We just can't have it anymore. But thank you guys for interacting in our chat here live with us, because I love our back and forth here, and I love all of your thoughtful comments, and please keep them coming. So thank you to all of you guys for that. We're going to talk about this RFK story in just moments on the 9/11 attacks. You don't want to miss this. This is unbelievable, what he said about it. And of course, the corporate media's response to it. We're going to unpack some of the crazy things that happened that day. You don't want to miss that. And we're also going to talk about the new draft. It's the Biden administration and the Pentagon getting ready to institute a new draft in the United States. Wait until you see the documents. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a conspiracy theory.
Yes, I'll show you the documents.
This is scary as hell. This is scary as shit. And we should all be concerned about this. And you should, take this clip and we post it later and share it with people, because this is coming, guys. And we should all pay attention to it. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Mumu. They have been a longtime supporter of our show, of independent journalism. They are fantastic. They've been really, really great. I've been loving working with their team for a couple of years now. And they continue to be able to provide you guys with up to 16 free stocks just for opening an account. Now, again, you don't have to do anything with your Mumu account. You can trade stocks if you want to, or you can just get those 16 free stocks after you make your initial deposits and open your account. And then you can sit on it and do nothing and just let those stocks grow over time. And you can forget about it if you don't want to do any trading. And then you can sell those stocks. And who knows if they go up? I mean, they're giving away a free Google or a Tesla stock. So, you hope they go up, but you never know, right? Stock market goes up and down. But nevertheless, if you want to start trading and you want a great platform to do it on, Mumu is the place to do it. I love using it for all of my different mineral stocks that I chart and track on a daily basis. I have great news alerts, great information. They give you all sorts of additional bells and whistles that you do not get from other apps, because you have to pay for it on other apps. On this one, you do not. Plus, they've just opened up in Canada. So they are now available in the Canadian market, in Australia as well. Again, you need to use our link to get these 16 free stocks. Go to redacted.inc/Mumu. It's redacted.inc/Mumu. Get up to 16 free stocks when you make your initial deposits. And our thanks to Mumu for supporting independent journalism. Well, do you believe the official story about the 9/11 attacks? Well, you're not alone. Robert Kennedy Jr. doesn't believe the official narrative of the 9/11 attacks either. Says something strange happened that day, and the liberal media attacking him over it, saying, look, this just adds to the pile of conspiracy theories that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a part of. COVID and now 9/11. But wait a second. The man whose uncle was assassinated in part by the CIA doesn't believe the official bullshit 9/11 report that failed to interview key witnesses, hid information from the American people. He doesn't believe that report? Shocking. Welcome to the club, Bobby. So this interview was conducted by CNN's Peter Bergen, who claims to be a journalist. Now, he did an audio podcast interview with RFK Jr., and here is the interaction that has liberal media so hot under the collar this morning. I'm going to play the entire minute and a half of this interview, and you can hear Peter Bergen asking the questions and RFK Jr.'s response. Listen.
You mentioned 9/11. The official explanation of 9/11 you buy?
Which is what?
Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11.
I don't know what happened on 9/11. I mean, I understand what the official explanation is. I understand that there is dissent. I have not looked into it. I haven't examined it. I'm not a good person to talk to about it.
Well, I mean, so there's doubt in your mind that Al-Qaeda was responsible?
Well, I don't know. I know that there's strange things that happen that don't seem...
What are the strange things?
Well, one of the buildings came down that wasn't hit by a plane. So, it wasn't Building 7 or Building 10.
That collapsed because two of the world's biggest buildings collapsed on top of it.
No, they didn't collapse on top of it. My offices were down there. My offices were closed.
So one of the buildings next to the Trade Center.
No, there's pictures of it collapsing. There's nothing collapsing on top of it. I mean, listen, I don't want to argue any theories about this because all I've heard is questions. I have no explanation. I have no knowledge of it. But what you're repeating now, I know not to be true.
To clarify, yes, I could have been more precise here. The government's official report found that Building 7 was hit with debris from the North Tower. That impact caused fires, which led to the building collapse. It's very well documented, and there's nothing strange about it.
So nothing strange about it, Peter says. But in fact, there were some strange things that happened that day, particularly around Building 7, which we'll look at in a second. But let's start, though, with a funny one, something we're told to believe. Here is one of my favorites. Here is Peter Bergen's own network, CNN, telling us that one of the hijackers' passports was found in the rubble.
Another development on Saturday, New York officials revealed at a news conference here in the city that a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that. No other details were given, but the discovery prompted the FBI and police to expand the search area down in Lower Manhattan.
Really remarkable how they'd find an intact passport of one of the hijackers. More strangeness, though, Building 7, that Peter Bergen tried to defend, said it was crushed under the weight of the towers, then he clarified it. But it wasn't even touched by the Twin Towers at all. In fact, we know that because of, eyewitnesses, who heard multiple explosions consistent with a controlled demolition of the building. And an independent investigation found zero evidence that a fire brought it down. In fact, the UAF research team found that the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 on 9/11 was caused not by fires, but by the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. Every column suddenly collapses, consistent, of course, with a controlled demolition, something they failed to mention, something he failed to mention. Just two examples of some strangeness on that day. Ted Walter joins us now. He's the co-founder of the International Center for 9/11 Studies, who has dedicated his life to getting answers for the families of the victims of 9/11. Ted and I did a very big deep dive interview on 9/11, Building 7, and what brought down the towers. I encourage all of you to go watch that interview. But Ted joins us now. Ted, great to have you back here on the show.
It's great to be back with you, Clayton.
Great to see you. So did anything strange happen that day, or should we believe the official 9/11 report? After all, Peter Bergen, in his clarification as part of of that podcast, says nothing strange happened at all.
Yeah, well, I would say literally hundreds of strange things happened that day. Anomalies, things that either never happened before or shouldn't have happened that did happen, and things that maybe should have happened but didn't, as far as the failure of our military to defend the skies that day. But if we want to start with Building 7, which is perhaps the most obvious anomaly of that day, it was a 47-story high-rise steel-framed skyscraper that collapsed symmetrically into its own footprint at 5:20 p.m. in the afternoon on 9/11. Now, many people may be aware that no steel-framed high-rise had ever collapsed prior to 9/11, and yet we're told that 3 came down in a single day. Now, if you actually look at the collapse, which I don't know that Peter Bergen has, but if you do, it's not only the fact that it came down, it's how it came down. It comes down symmetrically. And if you actually measure the rate of acceleration, it comes down in absolute free fall for about 2.5 seconds, which is about 8 stories. The building just drops like a bowling ball with zero resistance from the structure below, right? So that is an anomaly. And I think we can all agree that is strange, right? Even the official investigators, even all the engineers who looked at this in the years after 9/11, who essentially assumed that fires must have been responsible, were scratching their heads saying, this is really strange. We can't explain this. And it actually took NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, until early 2007, almost 5 years into their investigation, to come up with a theory, with a story for how this building could have collapsed due to fire. The lead investigator, Shyam Sunder, is quoted in 2006 saying, we're having trouble getting a handle on Building 7. So actually, it's not clear-cut whatsoever. And it's actually clear-cut if you look at it, right? It comes down symmetrically into its own footprint. The first hypothesis should be that this was a controlled demolition, and you would need extraordinary evidence to prove that it was not a controlled demolition. And that evidence doesn't exist because it took investigators 6 years to come up with a story, right? So as you mentioned, witnesses reporting explosions. We also have molten pieces of molten steel found in the rubble, previously melted beams pulled from Building 7, which we know that fires cannot produce, right? The molten steel has thousands of degrees of temperature. So these are just some of the anomalies that occurred on 9/11 that make it really overwhelmingly obvious that it was a controlled demolition. So Robert Kennedy Jr. is right to have questions about why that building came down, and I hope that he will look further into it now that this has come out in the media.
Yeah, all he said was strangeness. There's strangeness on that day, and that's, to me, incredibly reserved for a guy whose uncle, he says he has overwhelming evidence that the CIA killed his uncle. I mean, here's a guy who knows how involved the government can be in conspiracies actual conspiracies that are covering up massive changes of government, a coup by all accounts. So it was a pretty reserved statement, yet the mainstream media, Rolling Stone magazine, jumped all over the story. Rolling Stone, of course, well documented in having direct CIA ties, by the way. They devote an entire section of their article basically saying, just add this to the list of RFK's long list of conspiracy theories. Are you surprised by the liberal media's response? I should say, not liberal media, corporate media's response to this.
I'm not surprised at all. It's what we've come to expect, sadly. And you'll notice in that Rolling Stone article that there are statements that are just utterly false, such as that the FEMA investigation into the collapse of Building 7, which was conducted in the first year after 9/11, came to the same conclusion that the NIST investigation did. Well, that's just plain false. The FEMA report actually had a different theory for how the building came down, but they acknowledged that theory, and this is a quote from the report, that the best hypothesis had a low probability of occurrence. And they said, essentially, it remains unknown how this building came down. So 9 months after the building collapsed, investigators at FEMA essentially have no idea. That's what they're saying. We have no idea how this building came down. The best hypothesis has only a low probability of occurrence. So that's just one example of the falsehoods that are perpetuated in the mainstream media by outlets like the Rolling Stone.
Well, and there's, you mentioned hundreds of anomalies. We could just touch on a few more here so our audience has some more context if they're new to this subject, unlike you, who devoted your life to it. I mean, I recently spoke here on the show to Kevin Ryan. That interview is coming out soon. And of course, Kevin has looked deeply at the hijackers and the story behind the hijackers and how really there's almost no chance that they actually flew those aircraft. And even the flight trainers. Can you speak about how the anomaly, the strangeness around the hijackers piece of all of this?
Yeah, well, my colleague Kevin and others at the International Center for 9/11 Justice are more expert on this than I am, but I can say that it is far-fetched that 4 separate airliners would be hijacked in the space of an hour and a half or 2 hours, especially after the last one, Flight 93. The pilots already received a warning that other hijackings had taken place. So they would be even more on guard. They would have locked their door. And the 9/11 Commission report really gives actually no account of how all 4 sets of hijackers managed to commandeer those planes, managed to take control of the planes from the pilots. And it's absolutely implausible that not a single set of the pilots of all 4 planes would have squawked the hijack code when they realized that there was an attempted hijack taking place on their plane. So that's another thing that didn't happen.
That's a great point. Yeah, they would squawk a hijacking code that would go out to air traffic control, and they would do it immediately. And none of them did it. All of them failed to do that. Even in their training, they know how to do this.
Yep, it's standard operating procedure, and it's completely far-fetched that none of them did it. And that's just one of the many things that points to the fact that these planes were not actually hijacked by these alleged hijackers. Now, the supposed ability of these hijackers to navigate the planes to their targets and then actually steer them at incredibly high speeds at low altitude into those targets, the 2 Twin Towers and then the Pentagon, which is a very low rise building, is even more far-fetched than the idea that they could have hijacked all 4 planes. These pilots were novice pilots at best, right? And Hani Hanjour, who was the alleged pilot of Flight 77, performed, allegedly this incredible maneuver to bring the plane, in a spiral down, several thousand feet in the last couple minutes of the flight, and then crashed into the Pentagon at ground level. It's impossible. So it's a fairy tale that we've been asked to believe, and it's a fairy tale that people like Peter Bergen have made a career out of perpetuating.
Yeah, could it be the ultimate false flag? And that's exactly what I think all of the evidence is leading to in this, from multiple investigations, multiple eyewitnesses, and the people who've devoted their lives to actually researching this, unlike Peter Bergen. One of the largest false flag attacks. And then, of course, it's Occam's razor here. Why would they carry out one of the largest false flag attacks in American history to unite us around perpetual wars? The military-industrial complex, the trillions of dollars that goes to perpetuating, these deep state wars that we're permanently in right now. So you can see a clear line to the amount of money that's being spent on this. I think is fairly obvious. I would encourage all of you to catch our interview we did with Kevin Ryan on these specific hijacker questions. That'll be coming out in a redacted conversation. But Ted, any final thoughts on this? Are you hoping maybe we'll hear more from RFK Jr. on this topic? Maybe he's not one to sit back and say, I'm uneducated about a topic. He admits in this interview, I don't know a lot about it. I can imagine he's a reader. I think he will start to really dive into this, don't you think?
I think he will. And, you cited the University of Alaska Fairbanks report on Building 7. I hope he will take a look at that. I hope he will look at the information on our website, International Center for 9/11 Justice. We just published an article back in June that I was a co-author on, taking a deeper dive into the collapse of Building 7, establishing that the entire width of the building went into free fall instantaneously, from motionlessness to absolute free fall in the snap of a finger. So that's the kind of information that it's a peer-reviewed paper on our website at the Journal of 9/11 Studies that I hope RFK Jr. will take a look at.
Yeah, and the great work that Ted and his team are doing is just phenomenal. So Ted, thanks for taking some time out today to respond to this, as the liberal media has its hair on fire about RFK Jr. and saying there was some strangeness on that day. Thanks, Ted. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Clayton.
And thanks to all of you. I see in the chat here too, a lot of people pointing out the famous BBC report. And I'm glad somebody just brought it up, because I glanced over, and yes, thank you for your super chat on that. So a famous BBC reporter announcing that pre-taping a segment to be broadcast back in England, that Building 7 had collapsed, and that broadcasts in England 30 minutes before Building 7 collapses. How does that happen? That's what I would call strangeness. But Peter Bergen says nothing strange happened that day. So that's just another one of the hundreds of strange things that happened on that day. That's a very odd thing for someone to pre-broadcast the destruction of a building that wasn't even hit by airplanes.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Or either that or that reporter is fantastic. Really.
A clairvoyant.
A clairvoyant to know that building is coming down. Yeah.
And I've heard the people that argue I'm trying to think what their official response to that was something like, well, we had heard that it might collapse, and so that was kind of what they went with. And they're just like, we heard it might. Okay. It might. So
we heard it might collapse when there's literally no signs of it having trouble, that there's any signs that it was going to collapse. No planes hit it, nothing. But this building might collapse. Maybe you should just walk around your neighborhood and film that, so that in case one of those buildings does collapse, then you seem really clairvoyant about it. Okay. You already have that in the can ready to go.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. So thank you guys. Yeah, thank you guys. Oh, and by the way, so people are asking, well, who did fly the airplanes? Who did fly the airplanes then into these towers if it wasn't these hijackers? Well, wait until you see our interview with Kevin Ryan, because I don't want to give it away. It really is a deep dive in exactly what happened with these hijackers, and the evidence is overwhelming. So Kevin and I sit down for a redacted conversation. You don't want to miss this. It's really eye-opening. It's
blowing my mind.
I had chills. I did the interview yesterday with Kevin, and it's really stunning. And we're going to go through the details of it. So we'll publish that here on the channel. I think we're going to release it to our Redacted Plus members first.
Oh, yeah. It goes to them Friday. They'll have it Friday afternoon. and then everyone else will see it sometime either Saturday or Sunday.
Okay. So yeah, if you're a Redacted Plus member, if you go to redacted.inc and you're a Plus member and you support independent journalism for like the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you'll get that interview first as our way of saying thank you for supporting our show. And then we'll release it over the weekend otherwise. So yeah, it's a great interview and I encourage all of you to watch it. Kevin's great and his research is impeccable. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, we're going to move on and talk about how the American military and the Pentagon and academics that work for the Army, you didn't know they had any, but they do, are starting to up the rhetoric for a draft. Now, we've been talking about this for a couple of months now, and we're going to show you the numbers of what they think they need in order to lose 3,600 people a day. Are you ready for that? Who wants to be drafted to go somewhere where they think that many people will die because war is so imminent? Okay, this is not a fun story, but I'm going to show you because it's not me saying this. I want this not to be true, but we're going to go over it. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Lear, because it's no secret that if you're tuned in, you know that experts are predicting a recession heading this way. Layoffs are already happening and the government is ready to print more money, further devaluing the US dollar. Last year was terrible for most investors, and this year could be even worse. That we've shown you experts who have said just that. That is, unless you were smart and invested in gold, then you were protected from loss while other investments fell. So if the experts were right and we do get hit with a recession, 2023 is looking even better for gold and silver investors. So if you are interested in investing in gold, then let our friends over at Lear help you out and start purchasing precious metals or converting part of your IRA or your 401k into gold and silver IRA. Call Lear Capital today at 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com. Right now, if you buy an ounce of gold, Lear Capital will give away another free ounce of silver, and that's incredible. This is yours to do with as you please. Keep it, sell it, wait for it to increase in value. There are a lot of gold companies to choose from, and Lear Capital has over 25 years of experience, thousands of 5-star reviews, and a risk-free guarantee that gives you 24 hours to start purchasing before committing. So Lear Capital is a top choice when buying gold or silver. So call them at 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com, get your free gold and silver investor guide, and receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. So once again, 800-613-3557 or LearRedacted.com.
And I just want to say thank you guys to all of you guys who, this is really, really working. I'm just going to tell you, YouTube suppresses our show. Okay, they do it regularly. But when you do hit the like button, it actually pushes it further out in the algorithm while we're live. And so I don't know, YouTube hasn't figured out this mechanic yet. I don't know, but it's like our little secret. They love to suppress the show, but if during the live show you actually hit the like button, it just pushes it out to more people who could see the truth. So thank you guys for doing that. I know if somebody's watching on a Roku device or an Apple TV or something, yeah, it's like a little tricky because you have to like swipe up on your remote and like kind of click on it. It's hard to do. But if you're on a mobile device, it's much easier. But 10,000 of you have now smashed the like button tonight, and I can see it in the analytics. When you do it, it actually pushes. I should share this photo with you because I just shared it with the team internally, and it's amazing to see what YouTube does when you do hit the like button. So I don't just say that for my health. I do say that for the health of the show and trying to get this information out to more people. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for actually taking a second and doing that. So thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Here we go. Are you ready? Are you ready to talk about being drafted by the U.S. Army? Okay, here we go. The Army War College thinks that a war with either Russia or China, pick your poison, could cause about 3,600 casualties per day. So they want to draft. Raise your hand if you want to go to war for those statistics. Would you like to sign up to die to go to war with China or Russia?
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Yeah, to further the military-industrial complex's warmongering ways to expand for no reason. Let's throw more people into a meat grinder and see how that works out for us.
Well, you may not have a choice. Go ahead, maybe.
I was just going to say, maybe that's why the military-age men are coming over here, because they know that we're not going to fall for that. There's a lot of people in this country going to be like, I'm not fighting your stupid wars. Now they got a whole bunch of people that will.
Okay, that's awful. That's awful to think about. Because
hey, you want to come into our country? All of the people that live in the United States don't want to be involved in these wars. But maybe all of the people that are pouring across the borders into Eagle Pass, Texas from Venezuela, they'll sign right up and get government benefits and be thrown into the meat grinder.
Yeah, that's awful. I mean,
and probably true.
All lives are worth the same. So I don't like that. I don't want anybody conscripted into war. So you may not have a choice if this new academic paper for the Army is considered. Look at the very premise of this article. It's now, again, this is printed in the U.S. Army War College Academic Journal. So this is research they are presenting to the government to compel a draft. So it's called A Call to Action, Lessons from Ukraine for the Future. And it says that, we need to be forward thinking and we need to be as formidable. This part, again, this is something, sometimes you guys, I sit in my office studying and then I just throw my hands up and walk around the house and go, what the F? Like
so
that.
Here's a little story. Yeah, her office is downstairs, mine is upstairs. And I'll just hear yells from down. I go, he'll hear what the heck? As we're preparing for the show for the day and we're going through data and research. And I go, what the heck?
These are lies. They're lying.
They're lying. They're lying.
I just go nuts over this.
This is our operation while the kids are in school.
Yes. This part that I highlighted here made me just throw a scrunchie or something.
Very violent of you. The military would not hire you. Actually, the American military might hire you now because they want trans soldiers and everything else. So they'll maybe just throwing a scrunchie is about as violent as they want the military.
I went there. Okay, so this very premise I object to, that we need to beef up again so we can win in the same way that the Army won Operation Desert Storm. So before I talk about a draft, can we just I cannot let that go. Operation Desert Storm in 1991 killed tens of thousands of civilians. They weren't American, but we still care. They slaughtered Iraqi conscripts who were retreating from Kuwait on what came to be known as the Highways of Death and the Battle of Rumalia. Thousands of Iraqi troops were buried alive in their trenches by U.S. tanks, basically shoveling and plowing them down into their graves to die alive. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Much of the country's infrastructure was destroyed, and the Air Force admitted that it targeted water, sewer, and electrical facilities. They did so on the premise that Iraqis were not blameless for Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. Now, look at this quote from an Air Force officer to the Washington Post, I believe this was, saying that among the justifications offered now, particularly by the Air Force, is that Iraqi civilians were not blameless for Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. The definition of innocence gets to be a little bit unclear, he said. They do live there, and ultimately the people have some control over what goes on in their country. Well, we better hope to heck that Syria doesn't feel this way, that Libya doesn't feel this way. Otherwise, it would be torture of Americans for what our country does, right? By that rationale, Americans would be the victim of attack because our country invaded Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Iraq, which we're talking about right now. Imagine if that cut both ways. In fact, this is the rationale of terrorists. Like, your government's doing something bad, so I have to hurt civilians to get your attention. That makes us the terrorists.
It pisses me off so much because you're talking about people that are living under a regime that if they do try to rise up and fight the regime, that regime will kill them. And so our response to those people not putting themselves in that situation is to kill them. Like,
right.
What are those people supposed to do?
Right.
Right. Well, here's what they do. Then they flee that country, and then they pour across the borders of Europe and the United States because we've destabilized their country and they have nowhere else to go.
Right. And I don't know if Saddam Hussein would be considered a regime because we made him, right? And his people had a lot more freedom than, but okay, by that rationale, the narrative is they're not free, so we should kill them. That doesn't make any sense. Now, maybe what these authors mean by one Desert Storm is that few Americans died. That's only the official narrative, because they're saying that only 400 people died, mostly from friendly fire or accidents. But according to Scott Horton in his great book, Enough Already, that number does not account for Gulf War illnesses. He points out here that the government and media skeptics tend to dismiss the Gulf War illnesses as psychosomatic syndrome, a mass hysteria. However, credible evidence emerged in the 1990s that causes as varied as this commissaya detonation, experimental anthrax vaccines, anti-sarin pills, and exposure to dust from depleted uranium munitions may have contributed to the suffering of thousands of veterans of that conflict, which would be still going on today. You guys, that was 30 years ago, he says, and the bombing has happened ever since. Now, notice this quote. He says that, like, after this conflict, George Bush said, "It's a proud day for America. By God, we've kicked the Vietnam syndrome once and for all." Well, what is the Vietnam syndrome? It's this idea that wars are useless. People die. That wasn't worth it. Shouldn't have done that. That's what we call Vietnam syndrome. So he said we needed a win so we don't feel the malaise of war, as if it's not worth it.
We need some victories. I mean, that was the whole PR campaign for for Desert Storm. Tie a yellow ribbon around the tree. David, you remember that? Everyone had a yellow ribbon around the tree, and they vowed, the PR campaign was, we never want to show American bodies coming home at Dover Air Force Base. We want to make sure that the PR movement around Desert Storm is totally different from Vietnam. We won't allow reporters to go out and randomly film what's happening on the war zone. They'll be specifically embedded with certain units to look, make America look great. So it was a huge, massive PR campaign that they learned from the failures of the Vietnam PR campaign. Go ahead, David.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, there are people in these dark back rooms that are treating this like a chessboard, and they are planning all this, and they know exactly what they're doing. They know, if we can sacrifice this many American lives, we can destabilize this area, which will lead to us getting natural resources or whatever it happens to be. Make no mistake, they know exactly what they're doing. They have this all laid out, and they go in these rooms and they plan it in the secret of night and implement it.
Yeah.
Right. So already this paper is flawed with this whole, we won Desert Storm and we need to beef up to do it again. But let's keep going to see what they want of us in our blood sacrifice. The authors say that our military is moving away from counter-insurgency operations into more serious warfare. Again, I cannot agree with the word counterinsurgency. That's problematic. They did not do that. They waged wars, not went to counter them. The authors say that in order to go in and be ready for the future of warfare, the rules must be thrown out the window. This is the scariest bit that I've seen. I read this as, I'm going to tell you how I interpret it and then see if you agree with me. What I'm about to show you says, to me, we cannot be held to standards for war crimes as the American military. Read it for yourself. It says, when Mark Milley, served as the chief of staff of the Army, he explained mission command through a concept of disciplined disobedience, in which subordinates are empowered to accomplish a mission to achieve their task, even if they must disobey a specific order or task to do so. Without perfect communications, a subordinate officer or soldier must be trusted to make the right judgment call in the heat of battle. Mission command is not doctrine to be written, tested, and shelved. So basically, we can't write rules. Soldiers must be empowered to throw the rules out the window and do what they want here. And we need to be okay with that. That's scary. Does anyone read that as anything different? He says we cannot expect a brigade that micromanages garrison tasks to execute command operations successfully. So this says to me, when the media comes over and says, hey, you killed civilians here, that's unacceptable. Hey, you did this is unacceptable. They're like, we cannot be held to standards here. You can't write it down and expect us to follow the rules. So what are they calling it? Disciplined disobedience. You guys want to react to that? That's no rules of warfare?
No rules.
No war crimes? I mean, we already know that the United States is not a part of any kind of an international tribunal on war crimes because they would be taken to task for many.
That's why they avoid it, right? You don't want to be dragged in front of the Hague. So here's how you don't take part in it. You don't become a part of it.
And now you say, hey, in the future, we need more disciplined disobedience. So soldiers going rogue and just like like Taps. Like this is literally the movie Taps.
Yeah.
Everything goes, right? Anybody else find this disturbing?
Such a good movie.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So here's where they say that we need a draft. They say we cannot replace the people that we have calculated will die. Army theater medical planners anticipate a sustained rate of roughly 3,600 casualties per day. Should we just pause there for a second? This is what they think would happen in a war. 3,600 casualties per day.
With China and Russia, right?
Mostly Russia, but yes.
So they have repeatedly told us how America is not prepared for a double war with Russia or China. America is not even prepared for a war with China. We would lose a war with China. They would absorb everything we throw at them, right? As Colonel Douglas McGregor has pointed out on our show, they will absorb everything we throw at them. We'd have to travel thousands of miles against a brick wall, and they would absorb everything. And then on top of that, add in Russia. And so they're predicting 3,600 casualties per day. Day. So we just feed the meat grinder in order to keep the military-industrial complex going along. And 3,600 casualties doesn't mean deaths. It means incapacitated, disabled, and dead.
Right. And so
a variety of categories.
Well, let's
missing
look back
limbs,
at
missing
their
arms.
calculation. It says, yes, that includes casualties and injuries, non-battle injuries. So with a 25% predicted replacement rate, then the personnel will require 800 new personnel each day, which they say they're just not getting right now.
Where is Congress going to stand up and say,
you don't use lives like this?
Who is going to stand up in Congress and say, has everyone seen this paper? Has everyone seen what the Pentagon is planning, what the Biden administration is moving towards, and called for an end to this? Who signed up for this?
They've bypassed Congress now. It's an executive thing now. The executive branch is in control of all this stuff now. They don't even have to go to Congress anymore.
Right. You'd literally have to have a president, I guess, who would agree to sign a bill that would, or revoke war powers that they are still in existence since 9/11.
Yes.
So and of course, Dick Cheney and George W. Bush very brilliantly put in these additional executive powers to the executive branch. So they have these unbelievable powers. And they're not going to relinquish power. It would literally take a president coming in saying, I want less power.
Yeah.
To remove these powers.
Right.
Who's going to do that?
All right. So let's look more at their calculations. They say that the recruitment shortfall, nearly 50%, is a longitudinal problem, that this will just compound. Every infantry and armor soldier we do not recruit today is a strategic mobilization asset we will not have in 2031. Well, what happens in 2031? Will we be in a full-blown war there? Why are we using that year? Like, maybe we could also have peace by 2031. What are they calculating for? They said, this reserves number was at about 700,000 in 1973. 450,000 in 1994. Now the reserves is only 76,000. So that is unsustainable. So what they're saying is that this conclusion at the bottom, large-scale combat operations troop requirements, may well require a reconceptualization of the 70s and 80s volunteer force and move towards partial conscription, at least partial. So they want to conscript you because they are planning for 3,600 deaths per day. They say that today's warfare means that dramatically increased casualty rates will occur because technology just makes everything so fast. So this idea that you're just fighting by drones, they're saying is not the case because things move fast, you die faster. Just ramps it all up, the speed of death. Sadly, again, this paper lies on the premise that we are still suffering from being demoralized due to the Vietnam War. Here's how they said that. The U.S. intervention in Vietnam left the army demoralized, and American leadership watched as the Soviet-equipped Egyptian army forces nearly defeated the U.S.-equipped Israeli forces in the Yom Kippur War. And so what you might logically be thinking is because we were demoralized by Vietnam, we should think, let's not do that again.
Right. We learned our lesson.
They're doing the opposite. They're like, let's beef up to do that again. So,
Well,
and the problem is nobody wants to, so let's make them.
And 3,000 a day, that's 1 million a year. That is 1 million people.
That's
per year.
Crazy. Yeah.
Hey, that's fine. As Madeleine Albright once said about, children being killed in combat, collateral damage. It's fine. It's totally fine.
Worth it.
Worth it. It's worth it.
But they don't give you a reason. They don't give you what it's for.
Depopulation is great too.
Yeah, I guess that's just what you have to do to be that beacon of democracy around the world. You just have to lose 1 million people a year,
right,
to fight for democracy.
I mean, think about it as your family. Is this something? There's no rationale here. It's just like this is how we get ready for war. That's coming by 2031, according to their calculations. It's not like we think it's necessary for democracy. We think we'll be saving lives. No, nobody thinks they're saving lives. It's just we got to be ready for war because that's our business. So read this document for yourself. Let us know what you think of it in the chat below.
It's unbelievable. But thank you guys, everyone, for subscribing to the channel. I really, really appreciate it. Like I said, if you do subscribe, your name pops up here on the big board. So thank you very much for that. Hey, can we make the announcement? Are we allowed to make the announcement, guys, about El Store?
Which announcement?
Yeah. We can show it. Okay, good. I know we had some stuff. Okay. So our Redacted store.
I don't know if we have anything to show yet. We just did the final design. So the plan is we have new shirts and everything on the way. And then we also have some special shirts for Redacted Plus members, exclusive shirts. So he's still finishing up the Redacted Plus stuff. Okay. So that we'd probably be able to show it tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I jumped the gun. I thought we were going to show it tonight, so that's why I got excited.
Yeah,
but anyway, prepare because we got our classic designs in redactedstore.com. If you want to come over and support us and grab something for the fall, we've got our hoodies, we've got our mugs, we've got our hats, and of course for the fall, these things are fantastic. They're so nice, they're so warm, and they're very well made. I love my Redacted hoodie. I wear my Redacted hat. The gray one right there is the one I got. I wear that when I walk my dog in the mornings. A nice fall foliage out there, and enjoy that. There's my favorite hat right there. So you can grab it. And we are so close to rolling out some new exclusive designs. So tomorrow we'll have some new exclusive designs here as well. But here's all our classic designs. So grab these, will always be there. These are the mainstays of the channel. But redactedstore.com, we do not mark up the prices. We try to keep it as close to cost as possible, so that we don't, we're not making a lot of money on these at all by any chance. But it keeps the lights on here and it helps support our show. But again, if you want to grab something, please do it right now. And of course, tomorrow we're going to roll out some new designs, some new exclusive designs. For a limited time. So go to redactedstore.com, redactedstore.com. Thank you so much. And let me know in the chat, are there any items that you guys would like to see in the store? Anything that we don't have there now? We've got mugs, tumblers, hoodies, hats. Let us know in the chat. Is there something you guys would like? Dog leashes. That's a good idea.
Flags.
A redacted flag.
A sticker.
A redacted trans flag.
We have a flag that says "Do not comply." It's pretty cool. And there's no rainbow colors on it.
Redacted. Do not comply.
We're looking at some merchandise with my tagline: "Non-pacifist peace extremists." Clayton loves it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that one actually.
Yeah.
I want that.
You guys.
I want that one for sure.
Why do you hate it so much?
It does. I don't hate it. I love it because it's ridiculous. But it reminds me of. Like that 30 Rock, the rural juror.
It's hard.
Rural juror.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's just like doesn't flow off the tongue. It's funny.
Emergency use authorizations like that doesn't.
Someone says here.
Actually, shave my
coffee. Long story says coffee. Arturo says a keychain. Bobbleheads. Mark D says bobbleheads. A trucker hat. Oh, can we do a trucker hat?
We have trucker hats.
We have a hat, and if you're a trucker, you can wear it.
Baron Saturday says, "What about weed? Can we do redacted weed?
No.
Shovels. Shovels. A redacted shovel.
A shovel and a bag of lime.
Fanny packs.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Shovel and a bag of lime. We got redacted duct tape. Like what are we doing here, people?
Fanny packs. Jojo says a fanny pack, please. Little pins. How about tie pins? Ooh, I like that, a tie pin. That would be super classy. Violent says condoms.
No. We're not going to do that.
Try that. But for our show, it'd be Magnums.
Redacted for her pleasure.
Action figures. A bucket hat. I like that. Yeah.
Let's see what my action figure would look like.
Bucket hat is kind of like Gilligan.
Action figure.
Something you'd wear like fishing, like a bucket hat.
I have an action figure. I already have one. Is it here?
You've left it downstairs many, many times.
Oh. I had a...
We don't have a... Wait a minute. Our store isn't available in Europe? Alexander said... Isn't it?
Yeah,
I thought it... Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It should be. Why can't you find it in Europe? That's crazy. But it should be... Yeah, should be easily available in Europe.
Workout gear. I like that.
Because, we have people order from all over the world. So you should be able to get it in Europe. I've seen orders come in from Europe before. So hopefully that should be okay. Anyway, dog leashes. Yes, people like the dog leashes. Gummies. Raging against the machine says wood chippers. Can we get a wood chipper? CDs. I love all these are great suggestions.
Walkmans.
How about a cape? I like a cape. I would wear a cape. Would be fantastic. Remember that Seinfeld episode?
It was Larry David.
Larry David wearing the cape. It's like, who's the man in the cape? Who's the mysterious? He's my lawyer. Anyway,
you get a scepter to go with it. You can just walk in your redacted cape and scepter.
Right.
I'm down.
Or a walking stick. Original Gaming says
redacted
has been redacted. Socks. Oh, about socks. Bree Smith says socks, please.
All right, you're done. You're done reading out just names of items. We're done here.
Okay. Sorry to ruin your fun, everyone. Thank you guys for subscribing. Really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join us then live for the show. Thank you for subscribing and turning on that bell notification, even though YouTube suppresses the show and they hide notifications from our show. Do your best. Try. See what you can do. We'll be back here tomorrow. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.